So, you think you're untouchable?
Word life. This is basic thugonomics. This is basic thugonomics. Word life. I'm untouchable, but I'm forcing you to feel me. Word life. This is basic thugonomics. Word life. I'm untouchable, but I'm forcing you to feel me.
Good evening, Who Dat Nation, and happy Wednesday to our Bayou Blitz family. I hope everybody is doing well out there in this second week of June. Whether personal, vacation, whatever's going on with you, I hope it's great. And anybody that's tuning into our live broadcast, welcome to your Bayou Blitz podcast, where I am Bob Rose, one of your co-hosts to your podcast. And on the other side of your screen is your other co-host to your Bayou Blitz, Brendan Boylan. Brendan, how are you this June evening?
Yeah, doing okay. The weather's been warmer here, which is nice. Not nice when my AC went out this weekend, but story for a different day.
Mm-hmm.
But no, everything's going pretty swell up to this point. Hope it is in Pennsylvania. And the Saints have stayed out of like national spotlight so far this offseason, which is nice, right? There is no such thing as a normal Saints offseason, and this still classifies as a not normal offseason, new head coach, all that stuff. But at least they're not in the media for the wrong reasons, because we have certainly covered the teams during years where that was the case, that they were in the news for all the wrong reasons. My mind goes back to like the Lattimore arrest one summer, things like that. I'm just happy that they're not that type of news. So far, so good. Bob, we're going to dive into potential breakout players, which is always an interesting topic because everybody views the word breakout differently. And I'm sure you and I have some differences in opinion on what a breakout player could be for this team. But I do want to start with some players that have been trying out for the Saints or have came to interviews and visits. Real quickly, want to touch on jersey number changes. Which this one is silly, but I remember specifically being on the show with you 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago and saying Donovan Peoples-Jones wearing like 20-something was just not going to sit well with me. Well, that's not the case anymore. Retirement means that Kool-Aid McKinstry is now moving to wear number 4. Donovan Peoples-Jones will be wearing 14. I don't have to worry about a receiver wearing 20-something. I'm very happy about that.
Rashid, you got to get Shaheed out of that 22, man.
I know, but I don't know why that one doesn't bother me so much. Maybe it's because he started as like a return man, so it doesn't bother me because your brain doesn't associate like, oh, he's always been a receiver, which he has been. But a lot of times you associate kick returners with running backs or the greatest kick returner in the history of the league, were 23 and Devin Hester, so it doesn't really bother me.
No, I mean, for personal preference, I'd love to see Shaheed drop one of those deuces, and just wear the old Bob Rose college number of number 2, so that way I might actually go out and buy a Saints jersey for the first time since Drew Brees, really. Running backs or wide receivers in the 20s. That doesn't sit right. I don't even care for them in the teens. I like I'm traditionalist. I like my receivers, my tight ends, in the numbers 80s. Don't mind receivers in single digits as well. That I don't feel hypocritical, as far as calling myself a traditionalist when I say that, because collegiate wide receivers, have had single digits for decades upon decades. But I try my best not to be a get off my lawn kind of guy, so I keep some of these opinions to myself.
Sure. Well, you're hitting that age to be that get off my.
I am.
So you're definitely there. Okay, real quick before we talk football, you had your 35th, right? High school reunion.
Mm-hmm.
You start your volleyball yet?
I forgot I told you about that. No, that is next week. I entered the league as a free agent, and I have been placed on a team. The team name, it escapes me at the moment, but it's a typical goofy intramural type of team name. And I decided to run a couple hill sprints alongside my house today because I'm willing to acknowledge that I no longer have my 41-inch vertical leap. What I am not willing to accept is jumping like a white man when I get back out onto that court, and that's what I'm afraid that I am going to do. I know I still have some lateral quickness, so I'm not worried about that. The arm swing isn't what it used to be. I can adjust accordingly to that. But I'll be damned if I'm going to have like a 15-inch vertical leap down there. When I hit that court for the first time next week.
Okay, so there's that. How did you match up with other members of your graduating class? Did you feel good? What was it? What was the ordeal? Where's Lauren when we need her? I need Lauren's note.
Yeah, I know, and I told her that you and Courtney both wanted wanted her perspective, and she said that she'd give it, but she's working this evening, so so I said, okay. Well, they said on the show that you could provide a written testimonial, which she did not do. So I'll give her hell for that.
Just
what's that?
Just FaceTime call MASH.
Yeah, you could try it.
I don't think it would work. I think she'd be a little concerned if I was the one FaceTiming her over and over.
She'd probably think I keeled over on the air or something like that. But I'll tell you, I had the most. I feel very confident in saying I had the most hair, the fullest head of hair of any males, in that graduating class. And my wife, who probably has a jaded point of view, you would certainly think so. She believed that I was the best looking guy there, best looking and youngest looking. I did post a senior picture versus how I look today on Facebook. So if y'all haven't seen that yet, let me know how I compare. I'm kind of curious myself. Had some interesting comments, mostly complimentary, some that were just hilarious. But my wife said that I was the best looking guy there. And she said that there was only one or two guys that were even close to me. So that made me feel pretty good about myself. But if other women that were at that reunion were there and you felt that same way, my question to you was, where the hell were you in my life 35 years ago?
I did see the picture on Facebook, and my first response was like, man, hair. But that was the style back then. I mean,
yes, it was.
I get it. But yeah, a lot of hair. And I have no room to talk. If you guys really want to have fun, as I've told you guys over the years, I try to keep my Facebook pretty tight in terms of like friend requests and whatnot. But if some of you have kind of found your way through that and got a friend request accepted a few years ago, you can go through photos, and I have hair like past my shoulders when I was in high school. So yeah, it was a style for sure. Let's talk about football. Glad to hear everything went well. Congratulations on going and catching up with some people that you haven't seen in a long time. I skipped all of my 10-year, so I guess I'll be there for the 20-year. But we'll go to the New Orleans Saints. Let's go to some of those tryout / visit / professional interviews that happened this week for the Saints. I think the most notable ones in terms of guys that were actively trying out. Shane Lemieux, notable because he's been with the team and played a lot more snaps than a lot of people expected / wanted him to play.
Yeah.
But there's experience there. There's a familiarity, at least with the organization, not the coaching staff, because the coaching staff is 100% different. But there's some familiarity, which isn't always a bad thing to have when you bring on a new staff. And then Cam Akers, a running back who a few years ago was certainly a fantasy football favorite, waiver wire favorite. Obviously, injuries and some situational things have slowed him down in his career. But a guy that I still think has some positive upside, and this is a running back room that we've talked about. Yes, there's more depth. But while there's more depth behind Alvin Kamara, there are still question marks that have not been answered. And while I don't think the potential of Cam Akers answers any of those questions, I think it is another piece that you could have as a veteran through camp. What are your thoughts on those two guys that we'll get into? Gabe Davis, who visited with the Saints.
Well, with Lemieux, I'll make it short and sweet. And no, yeah, I mean, no, please. We've seen the Shane Lemieux saga play itself out. And I don't want to see Kamara, Shuck, Rattler, any of those guys. I don't want to see them get killed this year. You can do a hell of a lot better than Shane Lemieux. And I'll drop my mic and move on. Cam Akers, I agree with you. Cam, I was a real big fan of his coming out of Florida State and his first couple years with the Rams. Then you mentioned the injuries, specifically the Achilles injury, that cost him, pretty much one entire regular season, and some ankle injuries, that followed up. So you do have to wonder whether he still has that same pop. But that's why the Saints are kicking the tires to see if he does. If he does, I don't have a problem bringing him in, to add to the competition to that running back room. Now, the thing with Cam Akers, and injuries did have something to do with this, he was never able to really solidify a hold on a featured running back role with the Rams, 2 stints with the Vikings, and a short stint with the Texans. But the thing about that is Cam Akers is not going to be expected to be a featured back if he's brought in by New Orleans. That's going to be Kamara's job. Cam or anybody else on that roster, their expectation is to provide a viable complement to Kamara out of that backfield, something that this team hasn't had since the first go around with Latavius Murray. And it's been very obvious. It's affected Kamara's effectiveness. It's affected the offense's effectiveness as a whole. So if Cam Akers, who at his best was a power runner between the tackles with good pop, good burst to that second level, and enough speed, to make him a big play threat. If Cam Akers is anything close to that back, you bring him in. I know that they drafted Devin Neal. I'm a big fan of Devin Neal. I have a feeling he's gonna surprise a lot of people. But Devin Neal was a 6th-round pick. I'm a big fan of Marcus Yarns too, the undrafted back from Delaware. But Yarns is undrafted. Those guys went late in the draft, were not drafted at all for a reason. Now the Saints certainly have a history of finding gems in the late rounds or undrafted guys at running back and wide receiver both. But I mentioned this with Alan Ulrich on Under the Dome last night. It's one thing to unearth a gem that way, and that's great. But it gets very dangerous when you begin to count on that. And I thought that was one of Sean Payton's biggest downfalls late in his tenure as head coach, was that we know Sean has a big ego, and part of that ego was, I don't need to draft a wide receiver or a running back early because I'll find one in the late rounds or undrafted because I always do. Well, that's when it gets dangerous, when you begin to count on that. And speaking of counting on, you can't count on Kendre Miller to stay healthy. And although I'm rooting for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he didn't show a lot to me last year when given his opportunity. So again, if Cam Akers has something left in the tank, he isn't going to command a high salary. It's only going to be a 1-year deal. I say absolutely bring him in.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm still one of the few people in the world that have any stock left in Kendre Miller, because if he can stay healthy, he would be a perfect complement to Alvin Kamara, in my opinion.
He would be.
Let's move to Gabe, who hasn't officially tried out with the team, but had a visit. There appears to be a couple teams that may be interested in Davis. But Bob, you and I have been talking about the receiver position for how many years now? 2 years. And Gabe Davis is a really interesting guy. Still on the younger side, 25, 26 years old.
Oh, I thought he was older than that.
Drafted in 2020. Had some good years with the Buffalo Bills, and a lot of fans of the Bills were really excited for what he could be for the team, right? You go back to 2022, and I just pulled up the numbers. He played 15 games in 22, 48 receptions, 136 yards, 7 scores. He scored at least 6 touchdowns in each of his first 4 NFL seasons. He's a guy who has a little bit more size at 6'2".
Mm-hmm.
He's an intriguing guy. Now, again, this is not a guy that's going to come in and solve all the question marks that you have at a position. But it is intriguing. And it does give you some size, gives you some experience, a guy who has NFL experience, more than Donovan Peoples-Jones, in my opinion, Donovan Peoples-Jones had one really good year. Gabe Davis put up about 4 consecutive years with Buffalo, where he was looking like a real threat as a number 2, number 3 receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And he's still on the youthful side. I would love if they could swing it. I don't know if they can because, like I said, there are other teams that have expressed interest. I know in your backyard, Pittsburgh has expressed some interest in Gabe Davis. But this is kind of that mold. You brought up Tyler Boyd a lot as a guy that could be a potential fit. But I think Gabe Davis is kind of in that mold, a bigger guy who was a 2 or 3 throughout his entire career that has experience and could bring some value to your receiver room. So this is what I'm really going to watch closely.
Yeah, I'm 100% rooting for this. I like Gabe Davis a lot. I liked him in Buffalo. I was a little bit disappointed at his performance in Jacksonville, but I was disappointed in the Jaguars as a whole. Now, you mentioned Gabe Davis's size. Similar size to Donovan Peoples-Jones, but make no mistake, folks. This isn't the big intermediate possession physical type of receiver that Brendan and I have been asking for. Neither is Peoples-Jones. Gabe Davis and Donovan Peoples-Jones, while they're bigger guys, taller guys, they're more in the mold of a Marquez Valdez-Scantling, a boundary guy, a guy that can get deep, runs good crossers, but not necessarily a guy that's going to make a lot of plays over the middle in heavy traffic. But nonetheless, it gives you another viable talent in that receiver room, a receiving core that it just fell off the face of the earth once they lost Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and then Bub Means. All 3 of those guys were lost in a 2-week stretch before the midseason point. So you bring in Brandon Cooks this offseason, you sign Peoples-Jones, and now you're looking at Gabe Davis. If you can pull off a Gabe Davis signing, that, dare I say, that would give the Saints the most experienced talent they have had in that receiver room for quite some time.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, remember the thing with Gabe Davis, released with a failed physical with Jacksonville. There are a lot of teams doing their homework. I mentioned Pittsburgh. You have the New York Jets and the San Francisco 49ers that he's picking up with. A lot of teams doing their homework. And there's some belief he could be ready to go at the beginning of the season. But that's also, if you were to be a team that signs him, that is also a risk that you take on with that contract. He's another guy you expect a 1-year kind of prove-it deal that you're healthy. We'll see what team decides to take that chance, because you're probably not going to see him a whole lot in training camp. You're probably not going to see him a whole lot in the preseason prior to the regular season. So that'll be interesting. Let's transition out to potential breakout players for the Saints this year. This is a fun conversation because you could go a lot of different ways. It's a fun conversation because it is a new regime. Um, and I think it's fun because of how we define breakout player. So, Bob, we'll divvy this up and start like this. We'll each pick an offensive player, we'll each pick a defensive player, and then we'll both pick a wild card. And I think that should take up probably the rest of the show as we elaborate on some things and pitch things back and forth. They say age before beauty, so we'll look
um, I'm going to go on offense because since you're giving me first dibs, on the first pick, I want to beat you to this punch because it's a player that a lot of people have been talking about, jumping on the bandwagon recently because of his performances through OTAs. And I yelled about it last night. I yelled about it yesterday morning with Jordy Hultberg. I've been singing the praises of this young man since the very beginning of the offseason. And that is second-year wide receiver Bub Means. Out of Pittsburgh. The last 2 years of his collegiate career, he led the ACC in contested catches. So that tells you that he makes plays in traffic. He's not a big physical imposing guy, or not a big imposing presence, but he's a physical player. Has enough speed to get deep, but that's not really his game. His game is making plays after the catch, and as I said before, contested catches. And he was coming along nicely for a 3 week stretch. Last year, seemed to have a really good chemistry with Spencer Rattler. And then he was lost to the year with an ankle injury. I'm not calling Bub Means the next Marcus Colston or Michael Thomas or Joe Horn as far as late bloomers go. Joe Horn might be one of the greatest late bloomers of all time. But I am saying that I believe that Bub Means could be a genuine factor for this offense. And look, there's got to be a reason why the Saints did not go after that intermediate target in free agency. They didn't go after that intermediate target, through the draft, literally at all. Not even the late rounds. They're undrafted guys. They're all clones of each other. So that makes you feel like maybe they think, Kellen Moore and those coaches think that they have that intermediate target on the roster. Now, maybe it's Juwan Johnson. Lord knows, we certainly hope so. We've been calling for that for the last 3 or 4 years, Brendan. But I think out of the wide receiver room, it could very well be Bub Means. It would not surprise me to see Bub Means get starters type snaps and really solidify his role, if not as the number 2 receiver, then certainly the number 3 receiver and kind of the go-to target when you need to move the chains.
We're both going receiver, but yeah, I think Bub's been the forgotten piece. I mean, you and I have harped on it. We just got done harping on it with Gabe Davis and the Saints needing size at the wideout position, right? Like you said, Bub is not maybe the most physically imposing threat, like a Colston or like a Mike Thomas, but is a guy who brings some size, is not afraid to go across the middle, not afraid to take hits. And as you mentioned, Bob, a guy who last year before the injury started showing you some flashes of why the Saints selected him and why he deserves to be an NFL wideout. So it'll be really fun come training camp because let's be honest, you have Olave, Shaheed, Cooks, Bub Means, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Look at those 4 or 5 guys and go, you know what? Okay, really, any of those guys could be here. I mean, Olave is number 1, but the rest of it, you're like, any of those guys could really speak up and take that number 2 spot. So, if Bub continues to have the type of offseason that he's had, who knows? Maybe he is the number 2 wideout, which allows you to get more creative with Brandon Cooks and Rashid Shaheed, which might be a little bit more fun for Kellen Moore's offense, which leads me to my breakout player, which again, breakout is different to everybody. I'm going to take Rashid Shaheed. You guys might be saying, whoa, wait, breakout guy. And it's like, well, to me, yes. You know, he burst onto the scene as a rookie with those 2 touchdowns against Cincinnati and Arizona. Had high hopes last year. Was a big part of that 2-0 start last year. But then got hurt, right? 5, 6 games in the season, and that was it. Didn't really get to see it. To me, you can't break out if you don't play a full year at the position as the number 2 or number 3 receiver in this case. So for me, there's still a lot of high hopes for him, but he's still very unproven, which to me makes him a potential breakout candidate. I think you could see a big leap from Shaheed as a receiver this year. We know what he can do in the return game. We saw signs of what he could do as a receiver, especially taking the top off last year. But what is one thing you and I both said about this kid? He's a better route runner than a lot of people give him credit for.
Absolutely.
Right? And immediately my brain goes to Deontay Hardy when he was in New Orleans as a guy who was similar, right? Very skilled return man. They tried using him as a receiver a little bit more. I thought Hardy was a better route runner than people gave him credit for. But, like, this is levels better. Hardy was a solid route runner. But I look at Shaheed's tape. I look at his footwork. I see his feet, right? And his foot speed. Obviously, speed is one thing, but your foot speed is a completely different thing. Bob knows that because, you know, track and field Hall of Fame coach over there. But his foot speed's incredible. And because of that, he has all of the tools to be in the upper echelons of route runners in the NFL. And because of that, I think there's another, I don't want to say stratosphere, but there's another universe we could see Shaheed in, opposed to a guy who's just run and go routes constantly or constantly being a deep ball threat. I'm not saying he's ever going to be a guy who's going to catch 100 passes. But God, if you could get me to that like 60 to 70 reception range with him as a guy who can certainly take the top off, but can be very effective in the short to intermediate, that gives you a whole different layer of offense. And I think that potential is there. And that's why I say breakout candidate. Because if they're able to unlock that with Shaheed, my God, I don't care who's playing quarterback. If you can get the ball to Shaheed, Olave, Bub Means, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Brandon Cooks is still there. I mean, you have a lot of talent in terms of elite playmakers. And that's all you can ask for, especially in an offense with Kellen Moore, right? Where you saw over the years the ball gets spread out a lot. The ball, hit the hands of multiple guys. An offense that is really less about the quarterback having to sit and make the read and more of a system where the quarterback doesn't have to think too much, get the ball out and go. And when you have that offense surrounded with guys like Shaheed, Kamara, Cooks, Olave, guys that can make plays in space, I mean, that's a dream come true. So that's why I think Shaheed could certainly be a breakout candidate, quote unquote, this year for the Saints.
Yeah, I love Shaheed a lot. Like he's one of my favorite Saints on this current roster. Now your definition and my definition of a breakout player are slightly different. But I do agree with you that I do think that there's another level to Rashid Shaheed as a receiver. First of all, the national media that just assumes he's a deep threat and nothing more. Those are guys that don't watch the Saints. May not watch football, period, but definitely don't watch the Saints. Because I've been saying, and we have been saying it since his rookie year, Rashid Shaheed is a lot better route runner than people are giving him credit for. And you're an all-pro kick returner, punt returner. That means you got open field skills. What I want to see more from Shaheed are the jet sweeps. the wide receiver screens, the quick hitches. Get that ball in, like you just said, get that ball into his hands in an instant, and let him go to work. Get the ball out of your young quarterback's hands very quickly, so he doesn't have to hold on to it. While you keep your fingers crossed that the protection holds up, and just let your guys go to work. We've been sort of knocking the Saints, for having some clones in the receiving corps. Olave, Shaheed, Brandon Cooks. All three of their undrafted guys, starting with Chris Tyree, are clones of Olave, Cooks, Shaheed. Small, fast, shifty, agile guys. Well, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe we are going to see more wide receiver screens and hitches and jet sweeps. I, for one, would love it, because it showcases the speed that you have on your team. NFL speed is more than just go deep and chuck the ball as far as you can. It's trying to match up with these guys in the open field, lined up in different positions, getting the ball in different areas of the field, and that's where I think Rashid Shaheed, can really open up this entire playbook for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Defensively, I think you and I are probably going to be targeting the same player, so I quickly need to have another one in my back pocket.
It's your turn to go first.
Oh, we're snaking it. Okay, cool. That means you have the pressure. Or we can have completely different pages of the book. We'll see. Usually we're not. We're usually pretty spot on. And that's what happens when you do 166 episodes.
Yeah.
And the years what we've written together. Mine's easy. And surprisingly, there are some people in the national media that are saying this guy could be the guy who's going to make the biggest jump from year one to year two. That's Kool-Aid McKinstry. A lot more pressure on his shoulders, obviously, than a year ago. But remember, in the latter parts of the season as a rookie, after they traded Lattimore, and as he was thrusted into being a starter due to that and some injuries, he performed really well. Not like, oh my God, really well, but okay, this is going a lot better than I thought it would. I think that was kind of my takeaway with Kool-Aid, was this is going a lot better than I think a lot of people anticipated. Especially for a guy who did not see a whole, I don't want to say didn't see meaningful snaps, but did not see NFL starter quality snaps throughout his rookie year. Saw him in bursts, right? So, again, with what we saw on tape at the end of the year, with him having some more added responsibility, and a guy that had a first-round grade on him,
Mm-hmm.
were able to snag in the second round. I think that he's really poised to show that, hey, trading away Lattimore, not crazy. Not getting Paulson Debo back doesn't hurt as much, because look at what we got in Kool-Aid over here. I also think for the Saints, I cannot confirm how aggressively they pursued Paulson Debo in free agency, but to trade away Lattimore and lose Paulson Debo in free agency and then not really address corner throughout the draft tells me a lot on how they feel about Kool-Aid McKinstry and the confidence they have in Kool-Aid McKinstry. And that's why, for me, I really think he is poised to be the breakout star, not just offense and defense, of the Saints organization next year. Now, with great power comes great responsibility, right? And he has a lot on his shoulders, being the starting corner. But I think he's ready for it.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I'm a huge fan of Kool-Aid McKinstry. I thought he played very, very well as a rookie. Especially with no pass rush in front of him, and all those secondary defensive backs were left out, hung to dry often. And Kool-Aid hung in there, and I 100% agree with you that I think it's a big testimonial to how the Saints feel about him. based off of the fact that they traded Marshawn Lattimore and really didn't seem to make a hard push to re-sign Paulson Adebo. And then you follow that up with you didn't sign a cornerback in free agency, a top tier cornerback. I know they brought back Isaac Yiadom. And you didn't draft a corner until Quincy Riley, who I'm a fan of, but not till the 4th round. I think Kool-Aid McKinstry is poised to be the star of the Saints secondary, if not the entire defense this year. But my breakout candidate is second-year linebacker Jalen Ford. And I've talked a little bit about Ford. There's very little NFL tape on him so far because injury kept him sidelined, limited. Until well into his rookie year, and once he did get onto the field, it was more or less only a special teams duty. But click on some film of Ford in his last 2 years with the Texas Longhorns. This man was a monster. He was a playmaker in coverage. He was a downhill run defender. He is big. He's physical. His play instincts, rather his recognition, read and react instincts of opposing offenses. There's still a question to me that need to be answered there. And you'll remember that the Saints did draft Andy Stutzman too in the 4th round out of Oklahoma, who we expect to be a big factor in the defense. But the reason why I think at least last year's coaching staff, I'm positive felt so highly about him. Ford really wasn't ready to play as a rookie, not defense. But despite that, the Saints never tried to stash him on the practice squad. They never released him and brought him back with the ideals of signing him to the practice squad at the end of preseason, even though he barely played in the preseason. The reason for that was New Orleans was afraid that they would end up losing Jalen Ford if they subjected him to waivers, or he would be poached by another team if he were on the practice squad. Jalen Ford was literally a game day inactive for most of the regular season because he was on the active roster, and the Saints just basically stashed him all year long. That tells me that at least last year's coaching staff felt pretty strongly about him. And like I said, the analysis that I have on him, my draft analysis from him at Texas, very fast, ferocious sideline to sideline, and a playmaker in coverage. I think that this guy, could make some noise and maybe even limit Danny Stutzman's snaps as a rookie. We're looking for an heir apparent to Demario Davis, and a linebacker in Staley's defense is going to be Pete Warner's steady but unspectacular. Well, Demario Davis is steady and spectacular. This defense and the linebacking core as a whole, need more of that. And I think Jalen Ford could be that sort of playmaker this year.
Texas defenses over the last probably 3 years, very impressive. I'd have to go back and look if the dates line up, but the Saints brought in a defensive coach from Texas. There might be some familiarity there. I know not positionally, but just in general of working together. I'd have to look back and see if the dates overlap. But no, that's a good one. That is a good one. And beautiful to bring up the point that he was on the active roster the whole year. Wasn't a guy that was an IR stash. We've seen that many times over the years. He wasn't a practice squad stash. That also says a lot about how a team feels about you when they don't want to risk losing you on waivers, risk losing you on the practice squad. I mean, we have favorites over the years that have certainly been poached off of practice squads or have done the ring around the rosy of it all. I don't remember the exact number, but JT Barrett, I mean, good Lord, how many times was he released and brought back and dropped? And I know it's like a Saints record. It's in the 50s. That's all I remember. But they didn't do that, so that does say a lot. I do want to touch, just because you said linebacker, and you said Pete Warner is steady but unspectacular, and DeMario is steady and spectacular. This will have to be a different episode for a different day, maybe next week, honestly. What if players for the Saints is always a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
So the two that I'll just bring up defensively, the what if for me, Quan Alexander, if Quan did not get hurt, is always going to be a big one. And then for whatever reason, as soon as I said that, in my brain goes to Nick Fairley. If that had worked out for more than 1 year, where could have that gone? And we could do this, over and over with all these different players. But Quan Alexander, that'll always be that was your solution at linebacker.
Yeah.
A handful of years, and unfortunately, it just injuries suck, and that's just what it was, because that was the perfect pairing. Is it fair to call Pete Warner AJ Klein?
In decline?
No, AJ Klein, like just
the
linebacker, like steady, not spectacular.
Yeah, I think that's a similar comparison.
I don't know if it was too far of a reach. Klein had a good career. I'm not taking away from his
Mm-hmm.
a lot of good years in Carolina here too. Where I'm at. All right, wild card players, and then we'll kind of wrap up the show. So this could be offense, defense, wherever you want to go. The snake draft says it is back to you. Where do you want to go?
Look, and I don't know if this is where you're going to go or not. It's easy to say Kendre Miller, but I'm going to go with Isaiah Foskey.
Whoa! You have bashed that for so long,
and I'm going to continue to bash him until he gives me a reason not to. But I'll tell you, as you know, as most of our Bayou Blitz fans know, I do a segment with Jordy Hallberg every Tuesday morning. And, the last 2 or 3 weeks. What's that?
I'm still waiting for my invite.
The last 2 or 3 weeks, Jordy has been, and I'm so happy he has, he's wanted to focus more on defensive conversations rather than the same old, quarterback.
Sure.
And there's a lot to talk about, and a lot of what if questions to be asked about this Saints defense. One of them, of course, is an edge rusher. Well, we talked about the Saints not re-signing Paulson Adebo because they basically chose to spend the money on re-signing Chase Young. They still have Carl Granderson. We believe that Cam Jordan is going to play more of a down lineman role. That one of the end spots in the 3-man fronts, and it's pretty clear that Granderson and Chase Young are going to be the stand-up rushers. They've been asked to lose weight, but who's the third guy? The Saints did not get one in free agency, not until Chris Rumpf, which has been a special teams guy his whole career, and they didn't address it in the draft until the 7th round. Now, I like Fadil Diggs, but again, just like we talked about before, you're not counting on, or at least it's dangerous to count on late round draft choices to make a difference. So, where's your confidence? Who is your confidence in your edge rush depth? Jordy thinks it might be Isaiah Foskey. Now, I've watched Foskey pretty closely from Notre Dame on. And one of the reasons why I'm angry at Foskey on a personal level is because I also predicted he was one of the 5 Saints draft choices that I got right out of that abysmal draft. And then with Foskey, I went on to predict that he would be the defensive rookie of the year. The man has made 2 tackles, I think, total.
Hasn't played. It's not even.
Yeah, right.
He just hasn't been on the field.
Right, because you look at him in preseason and he looks absolutely clueless. Well, Jordy's argument is, if Foskey's a stand-up edge rusher, he's not dealing with tackles or guards in the trenches. He's able to get a run and start at these blockers. Maybe this showcases his athleticism. Well, maybe it does. Now, I counter Jordy with, okay, but the guy has looked absolutely clueless, and you put him in space, that might actually get worse. But again, you look at the Saints' decision making. No edge rusher in free agency, no edge rusher until the late rounds of the draft. Who is going to back up Chase Young and Carl Granderson? Maybe it is Isaiah Foskey. So yeah, that's why I didn't go with him. Going with him as my defensive breakout player would have shown too much confidence. Going with him as a wild card, I think, shows my belief in some potential being there.
I like it. After you explained it, I liked it. That shocked me. I was like, whoa, this has been a guy that has been on Bob's hit list for a little bit.
My defensive Traquan Smith.
It hasn't hit that level. I don't know if there's going to be a player that hits that level, which I will argue with you till the death. He was not as bad as you have it in your head. He was like, he never lived up to what he was supposed to be, but we have had much worse receivers stay in New Orleans for a much longer time.
Yeah. I'm not going to get into we're 3 minutes before 10 o'clock on the East Coast. I'm not going to get into a Traquan Smith debate.
Okay, we'll save it for one of these really dry periods in the offseason. Is just the Traquan Smith conversation. All right, my wild card. So going off of what you said is potential, right? I'm going to cheat a little bit because you could have argued he was the breakout guy from a year ago, but he's now changed positions. That's Trevor Penning. I think he's going to be a hell of a lot better inside. Mm-hmm. I really do. And that was when he got drafted, right? The Saints desperately needed him. They got him. But what was the things about him that were the negatives? It was like, well, his feet, right? His feet. Is he fast enough? Is he fast enough? He graded so well as a mauler, a guy that just was this uber aggressive physical guy. Well, guess what? When you kick a guy inside, he gets to do that a lot more than he does on the outside. The height, I know, is a problem, quote unquote a problem with him being 6'7".
It wasn't for Andrus Peat.
Right. He was a big guy too. But I was gonna say, now you have Tyler Shuck, who's 6'4", 6'5". And if it ends up being Rattler, I know Rattler's a little bit on the smaller side, but Andrus Peat, to your point, he had Drew Brees behind him, and Drew Brees was 5'11". I'm still not convinced Drew's 6 feet.
He's not. There's no way. If he's 6 feet, then I'm 5'11", and I ain't 5'11".
I got pictures with you, buddy. I know you are not 5'11". But yeah, so in all honesty, I think all of the things that we were so high on when it came to him allows him to slot in the guard so much better. And you look at the guy that he got compared to a whole lot, Kyle Turley, who was a guard.
Mauler. A psychotic mauler.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's like, well, okay, that just fits him so much better. I don't know about breakouts where this guy's going to be like a Pro Bowl guy by any means, but he's going to be a we use the word serviceable a lot when it came to Trevor Penning a year ago at tackle. He's going to be more than serviceable at guard. He's going to be an average to an above average guard, to where he was going to be a serviceable to average tackle. And if you spend a first-round pick on a guy, you don't want him to be serviceable or average. You want to see that average to above average to Pro Bowler to All-Pro, right? I'm not going to go and say he's going to, I'm not saying he's going to be a Pro Bowler. I'm not going to say he's going to be an All-Pro. But he's going to be more of that average to above average guy where he can be super physical at the point of attack. He's going to open up running lanes for Alvin Kamara, Kendre Miller, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, whoever it may be. And they're going to be able to be really dominant on the left side, right? Because you're going to have Banks on the left, Fawag on the right. So you're going to have Banks who, we brought up the stats a couple shows ago. You want to talk about fantastic unworldly college numbers for a guy. And you look at Banks, he's going to be on the left. And then you put a Mauler right next to him. That probably gives you some confidence at tackle, too, knowing you got this big dude who's about the same height as you that probably could eat you for breakfast, and he's, a fellow offensive lineman. That's got to give you a lot of confidence. I think the Saints are going to have a lot of confidence running to the left side this year. So for me, it's going to be Trevor Penning. I know it's cheating a little bit, but I really think guard was the best spot for him from the jump. But there was so much of a need for tackle. It was like, I don't know. It was like trying to take a hexagon and fitting it into a round hole, not like a square. Like at least a hexagon's close, and you're like, I might be able to make this work, and it just didn't work. And now they're able to move him to his proper spot. So for me, it's going to be Trevor Penning.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And like you said, if Penning's physical, his footwork has always been more of a guard. Now, we thought that, Kyle Turley, certainly overcame some footwork issues, although I will go to my grave saying, Kyle had a lot quicker feet than what people gave him credit for. Penning didn't. As a matter of fact, Penning's feet were slower, than what we were worried about coming in, and he wasn't able to overcome that. It was a slightly less liability over on the right side at right tackle, where you said, like you said, and I agree with you, he was in the serviceable to average, slightly above average range. But now you move him inside, and you have Eric McCoy on. Trevor will have Eric McCoy on his right shoulder. One of the league's best centers, and a first-round pedigree in Kelvin Banks. If Kelvin Banks is anywhere near that first round, meets those first-round expectations, you can have the makings of a really good offensive line.
Absolutely. And I do think it's interesting. We've said Kyle Turley for a long time, but I do think it's interesting in the sense that Kyle Turley started at guard as a rookie and then bumped out to tackle, and now we have the exact opposite with Penning, who started at tackle and into guard. Like you said, I think that says a lot about Turley having overcome some footwork stuff, but it was also there. I mean, he ran a fantastic 40, if you remember Turley's combine, and that really helped him jump up draft boards, if I believe. Where he serves me well. And I know Penning had a very good combine as well. But running a great 40 doesn't always translate. This goes all the way back to what we talked about with foot speed versus real speed. Shaheed, okay? Just because you're fast does not mean you have fast feet.
Right.
And that is the case for Trevor Penning, where, your 40 time might have been great, but your feet aren't fast. And that's one thing that separates Rashid Shaheed from other return men and other receivers.
Yep. Well, I mean, and people were talking about Trevor Penning's 40 time for such a big guy, and I understood why. I was looking at his shuttle times and 3-cone drills, which were not great, and that's what concerned me. How often are NFL football players out in the open sprinting for 40 yards? Not often. A hell of a lot less often for offensive linemen. 3-cone drills, shuttle runs, lateral agility. Those are the things that I pay attention to, and those are the things that Trevor Penning has struggled with since day one. Not going to be on display as often. Still will, but not as often as a guard.
Well, this was a good show. It felt quick. It felt like we were just always on beat going. So that's a lot of positive things. Bob, you've been really busy. You're always writing for somebody, whether it's Athlon, whether it be Saints Wire and USA Today. You do this podcast. You do Under the Dome. You do Jordy's show on Tuesdays. You're a one-man band, as some people might like to call it. So as that one-man band, where can people find the one-man band and continue to follow you on your, I guess technically it's a world tour, right? Because Jordy's in Louisiana. I'm in Charlotte. right? Like you can go down the list. So where do people continue to follow you on your world tour? Because I was on a world tour for like 2 years. So my world tour's over. It's up to you now, buddy.
Well, most of my written works are going to be with Saints Wire and the USA Today Network. From here on out. So make sure you catch not only my work, but there are other great writers over there at Saints Wire. So make sure you check them out. I am at least for the time being, until told otherwise. I am still putting out some pieces for Athlon Sports. This month I'm focusing on the history of each jersey number. As we count down. So make sure you check out that series. Over on Athlon. Wherever I publish my articles from, I still post them on my personal social media, which is Bob Rose on Facebook, at Bobby R 2613 over on the X Twitter. And you'll remember we swung and missed early in the show. But I certainly wanted to bring it up before we closed out tonight. Your Bayou Blitz is continuing to be a proud promoter of Get Checked or Check Out, a foundation started by Shireen DeWalt. The foundation that sponsors and runs the original Go Black and Gold celebrity charity fan cruise. That I went on with my family a couple of months ago. Sailed out of New Orleans into Cozumel and back. On there with some just stupendous, outstanding, terrific, special people. Not only the Saints players that went there, we had one of them, Courtney Roby on last week, but also Delvin Breaux, Tyrone Hughes, Pierre Thomas, Michael Lewis. They brought their families, but not only those guys, but all you fans, all you family members, that went on this cruise, and we were intermixed together. It was such a terrific experience. We will have cruise dates to announce sometime in the upcoming week, so stay tuned for that. But Get Checked or Check Out does things all year round, and they want to focus on one health issue per month. May was Mental Health Awareness Month. June is Cataract Awareness Month. So people talk about lately we've been talking a lot about mental health. That continues to be important. Your physical health, go to your doctor's appointments, your specialists, everything like that. A lot of people forget about eyes. Don't forget about your eyesight, especially as you get older. Now, cataracts are usually associated, with an ailment, in older people or as you get older. But I got news for you: hereditary issues. Chemical issues, what you put into your body, especially if chemical abuse, drugs, alcohol, prolonged exposure to sunlight. If you have a job where you're on the computer a lot, and most of us do now, those kind of factors, they can cause cataract issues earlier than the average person. So, in honor of June, and Cataract Awareness Month, make sure you make that appointment with your eye doctor. This is from Get Checked or Check Out. Please go to their website as well. If you have some extra money, donate it. It's certainly worth a great cause. They need that money for research, to help set us, you guys, family members, up with the resources and facilities and answers that they need in times of health crisis, either to yourself or to a family member.
Yeah, super important. And like what you said, even a younger guy like me, I'm starting to really feel it in my eyes being in front of a computer screen almost every day. Now, there's certain things you can do for that, right? Like blue light glasses, you can install different things on your computer, this, that, and the other. But it is extremely important to get your eyes checked out. Extremely important. I do want to talk about men's mental health month, just like we did last week, with it being June, and not a lot of attention going towards men's mental health over the years. We kind of checked in with each other a little bit before we hopped on the air, as Bob pulls out the glasses as we talk about it. Yeah, like I said, we talked a little bit before we got on about just kind of life, how we were doing. Those things are super important. Now, Bob and I like to put on a special face when we're on the air, like we don't like each other or something secretly behind closed doors. I'm just kidding. Check on your people. I mean, Bob and I have checked in on each other. There have been times where, God, I remember probably like 2 months ago, we were on the phone for like an hour and a half, just back and forth, just talking about stuff on a random Monday or something. Check on your people. You never know what they're going through. Shoot, I talked to a friend this week. I just shot him a text like, hey, man, I hope you're doing okay. Haven't heard from you in a while. Love you. And, I know even for me, just sending the message, it did a lot for me. So I'm sure being on the receiving end, it probably did a lot for him as well. Check on your people. You never know what they're going through. And if you're one of those people that is really going through it, reach out to people. Bob says it almost every week. Reach out until you get what you need. It might not come from person number one. It might not come from person number two, but there's someone out there that is going to provide what you need. Super important. So I hope you guys continue to remember that as we go through the rest of the month. For me, you can follow me and my work on the X Twitter, on Instagram, and now on TikTok at BT Boylan. You can follow me and my Saints coverage. Again, like I said last week, I'm twiddling my thumbs waiting for betting props and for fantasy football to roll around. But you can follow me over there with Athlon Sports. And until next week, I hope you guys find some peace, spread love, practice positivity, and make sure everybody writes on their calendars. Bob has volleyball next week. It's the first thing we're talking about next week is how did Bob's volleyball game do? Did we bring a tape measure? Did we get the vertical? I need one little comedic photo of like your wife with a tape measure, like your feet in the air, and it only say about like 15 inches, just to heckle you a little bit. I'm just playing, buddy. But that's gonna be the first thing we talk about. So until then, I hope you guys mark it on your calendars, and we'll see you back next Wednesday. We'll see you then.
So, you think you're untouchable?
Word life. This is basic thugonomics. This is basic thugonomics. Word life. I'm untouchable, but I'm forcing you to feel me. Word life. This is basic thugonomics. Word life. I'm untouchable, but I'm forcing you to feel me.